Well, hello, New Orleans, and welcome to what's going to be a short and sweet version of the live Dattitude podcast here on a Wednesday morning. Wednesday, Dattitude. It's the holidays when we're doing a Wednesday edition. I'm Jim Derry along with Jeff Duncan. This is episode number 120. And Dunk, what's going on this morning? I know you're flying out to Santa Clara. You're not going to spend your Thanksgiving over there, are you?
No, I'm actually going to be here. I was planning to spend Thanksgiving out there in the Bay Area, but now I'll be here leaving early Friday morning. So,
okay, well, good for you.
Yeah, it'd be good to get here. Although it's been warmer in San Francisco than it has been here for the past week.
It's crazy. I mean, the weather here is nuts, and obviously, you start when you get to be our age, you start feeling it a little bit more. So to feel it in November, I don't know. It's crazy. It'll be an interesting game out there. All right, let's get right to it. Saints Niners, Dunk. We're not going to give our predictions. That's the last thing we do on our show each week, so we're not going to give it too much away. I think you'll probably figure out as we go along here, but not a really good matchup for the Saints. Dunk, you're talking about the number one defense in the NFL, number one overall defense, number one in rushing defense. So I think a lot's going to be on Andy Dalton's shoulders this weekend.
That's a perfect way to kind of get into this game. I think it's a bad matchup in a lot of ways. The Saints are a run-first team. That's really their bread and butter. And no one's been able to run the ball on this 49ers front. And that's going to force Dalton and that passing attack to make hay. And that seems fraught with peril with the offensive line issues. Now, we'll know a lot more, JD, later today and the days ahead with the availability of some of the offensive linemen. I think Andres Pete will probably be back. I mean, he was an emergency player last week, but he was fully dressed for the game. So I would think that would be promising for his chances to play, and that will help a lot because they're going to need everybody up front with Nick Bosa, and they're talking about maybe Armstead coming back this week. That's just a really good defensive front, well coached, and the Saints are going to have their hands full.
Welcome in comments and questions this morning in the Live Dattitude podcast. If you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can leave your comments or questions right there in the section. If you're watching on Twitter, you're going to have to not email me. You can email me at jderry@theadvocate.com if you like. I have my email up, but it's probably easier to tweet at me at Jim Derry Jr. on Twitter. At Jeff_Duncan is Duncan's address. But it's Dunk, it's just a time where this, we talk about the matchups. It's not just the matchups. It's the fact that, we've seen one good week from this offense. Does that mean they can continue to do that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we've been here before, right? After the Raiders game, and then things fell off pretty quickly. They're going to have to play very clean. I thought that was one of the real promising signs of the Rams game was very few penalties, very few mistakes, few mental errors on both sides of the ball. It's going to take that kind of performance. They cannot shoot themselves in the foot against the Niners. I mean, the one thing about the Niners defense, as good as it is, as sound as it is, they don't force a lot of turnovers either. So that's good for the Saints. They cannot afford that going here. And, they're going to have to somehow generate some points in other ways, I think, either field position battle, get into a short game. I think the blueprint might be what the Chargers did a couple weeks ago when they went to San Francisco or Santa Clara and played them all the way down to the fourth quarter. They still lost, but they were in the game, actually leading a lot of the game. And they it was almost like a old basketball philosophy where you shorten the game, keep the ball away. I think the Saints are going to have to do that to be in this one.
If they are in this one, obviously they're going to have to rely on their defense. And we've seen the defense at times play really well, but at other times just kind of not show up. Especially, last week was a perfect, I know they were playing the Rams and they didn't need Cam Jordan and all those things, but, I thought the defense played outstanding last week. And I know it was against a banged up Matthew Stafford and then a backup quarterback, so you can't put too much stock into it. But just the way they were playing and the chemistry and, getting excited about the game and being there, it was since the Raiders game, I hadn't seen that. And really only a few times all year.
I could not agree more. I mean, you can tell early on, like almost the first series, whether the defense is going to be into it or not. And you could see right away when they got that first stop. I think it was Paulson Adebo made a big play
Right.
on third down, and you could see the energy and enthusiasm. That's what it's going to take. I don't know where it's been. It's kind of come and gone this season, but the Saints have to play at a high level. Now, I'd heard earlier this week, and again, we'll know more today, but I heard some positive news about Marshawn Lattimore too. Now, I don't know if it's going to manifest itself into him getting on the field, but I have heard some positive things about him. That would be huge.
Well, it's too late to put him on IR anyway. So
right. What worries me if I'm a Saints fan in this game is just the amount of offensive weaponry the 49ers have now. I mean, they are stacked. They attack you in so many different ways offensively, and their offensive line's been very good at protecting Garoppolo, which is kind of the key. If you can get after him, move him around, he can make mistakes, but they've been so solid up front, he's been able to perform at a very high level. And all he does is get the ball out in space to these incredible athletes. They have Deebo Samuel. Now they have Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, running back from Louisiana, who they're very, very high on. We know about George Kittle. The Saints have seen George Kittle, what he can do. And Brandon Ayuk has come on. I mean, they have a weaponry that the Saints have proven to struggle against, and that is getting the ball to guys in open space. And can the Saints come up and tackle them? And they didn't do that against the Steelers, 14 missed tackles. And I guarantee you that's what Kyle Shanahan sees on tape and is going to attack the Saints that way.
Take a look at the graphic here with the spread on it. It's not often that you see. It's been a while, except maybe I'd have to go look back and see.
I got the historical information on that.
Okay, the Saints are 9-point underdogs. I would imagine that they were probably at 9 or more against Miami last year when they were going into the game with Ian Book. But other than that, I don't know. I mean, you'll have to tell me. I have not done my research.
Two times they've been big.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the only two times in the Peyton Breeze era was last year in Tampa, which they won the game outright. I think they were like 11-point underdogs in that game. And then if you remember, back in 2015, the Saints, of course, were pretty bad, and they played Carolina with Cam Newton when they were 15-1. And they were about, I think, 9.5 or 10-point underdogs. That's the only times in the entire last 17 years that they've been this big underdog. Let me look at an asterisk here. They've had two times at the week 17.
Right, those don't count.
Resting starters, I don't count those.
Yeah, I know this. Because I did this last week, looking ahead. I think the Saints have only been double-digit underdogs. I think it's 13 times since in this century. Wow. So 13 times in this century, and I think that like 4 of them were in 2005. Yeah. When they had all the Katrina issues. So, I mean, you think about that. It's kind of amazing. It's way less than one a year. I mean, it's rare that the Saints are this big of an underdog. And the money line, this has grown, by the way. The Saints were plus 300. Yeah, I didn't even notice this, but the Saints were plus, I think, 300 or 310 when I went to bed, which was really early this morning. And now they're plus 345. So they haven't upped the line, but they've upped the money line, which means Vegas gives the Saints almost no shot to win this game.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that as well. And it's just a tough matchup for the Saints because of some of the things we talked about. We've seen them struggle mightily when they played very physical teams, which is surprising because that's always been the MO from this team. But the Ravens, the Steelers, and the 49ers are built that way in the trenches. And they do some stuff that's always given the Saints problems. They do a lot of, misdirection, kind of cross field movement, things where they get their playmakers moving in space and get a lot of yards after catch. That's always given the Saints a lot of problems. So it's a big week for the defense, like you said.
How do the Saints look? I don't get Pete Carmichael. Okay, I know I've been all over him, but last week, again, I get it's the Rams. I'm not just talking about who they played. The game plan was completely different last week. Completely balanced. I thought it was wonderfully called. I thought he did a great job of mixing in Taysom. That's how many times you should see Taysom Hill in a game, in my opinion. I know Andy Dalton doesn't like it. Too bad. You have got to involve Taysom Hill in the game. You've got to let him throw a couple to keep the defense off balance. Something's going on with Kamara. I don't know if it's his trial. He's not playing very well. I get the O-line is banged up, but Taysom's still doing his thing. something's not right with Kamara. But at the same time, you still got to try to run the ball. They did that last week. They got the nice balance, the nice mix. I get that you're probably not going to be able to run the ball against San Francisco, Dunk, but you're still going to have to try to run the ball.
And I think they got to try with Taysom Hill. I mean, the one thing
I agree
the quarterback gives you in that package is it gives you a numbers advantage. That's why Sean Payton, if you heard his comments this past week, he made a great point. I mean, Taysom Hill is much more effective when he's lined up at quarterback than he is at tight end because it gives you a numbers advantage. That's the whole point of having the quarterback run. And we saw that last week when they tried to run Kamara just out of traditional runs. Didn't work very well. Rams are pretty good up front, and they struggled to run. But when they got Hill in there, things opened up because that numbers game, and he was able to get the ball to Kamara a few times for nice gains when he's at quarterback. So I think that's kind of the secret sauce going forward for this team. But part of the problem, and Pete Carmichael's talked about this, and I don't know if it's just a convenient excuse or not, but part of the problem is they've been falling behind. And when they fall behind, they don't lean on the run as much. And, Dennis Allen talked about that on his coach's show this week. They were able to play with the lead. And when they're able to do that, obviously everything opens up.
Yeah, but their idea of falling behind is what, 13-10? They completely abandoned the run against Pittsburgh. They didn't trail by more than 3 until middle of the fourth quarter. So don't hand me that garbage. I mean, you could try to sugarcoat it any way you want, to spin it any kind of way you want, just like everybody can in politics. This isn't politics, it's football. We could see stats and we could see numbers. And if you weren't trailing by that much to abandon the run, and they do that often. It's not just that game. I mean, I get the Arizona game, you had to throw it 47 times or whatever. That game, you did have to throw it. You did what you had to do. But for the most part, when they're trailing, they're not trailing by a whole bunch. They're never really out of games. Right. But so to abandon the run, it's just crazy.
It didn't look good when the Cincinnati moved the ball up and down the field pretty much at will against Pittsburgh's defense a week later. I have to say that.
There's no doubt about that. Charles Broom, kind of on what we were saying. In fact, he typed it in as we were talking about it. Good to see the Saints being more creative on offense in their use of Taysom Hill. Probably a lost season, so may as well do some experimenting. If nothing else, Taysom provides high entertainment value, and his obvious enthusiasm for the game is great to watch. If this comment would have come through, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago, I would have said, no way, no how. But you know what? At this point, I'm not opposed to seeing kind of a mix. See Taysom even in there even more. I don't think Taysom Hill, first of all, I know he's never going to be a starting quarterback in this league. He's 32 years old. You don't become a starting quarterback in the NFL at 32. You just don't. And I think that the role that they use him in, when they use him properly, is fantastic because teams don't, even the good teams, they don't really know how to defend in the long run is going to do damage. But at this point of the year, I kind of agree. Make it entertaining. And if you find a way to get yourself back in it, if you win one of these next 2 games against either San Francisco or Tampa Bay and really do get yourself in it, who knows? I mean, why not see more Taysom?
Well, they got to win one of these next 2 games. I mean,
100%. They have to
get to 9 losses and think you're going to pull it out. But I do agree with you. I thought he was more creative offensively. Look, even one of the plays that didn't work. Remember the pass that Taysom threw in the corner of the end zone to Jarvis Landry. He couldn't get his hand on the seams of the ball, and that caused a little bit of a timing delay for him to get the ball out. But that was the exact play the Ravens used with Lamar Jackson to score on against the Saints, almost the exact same spot on the field. So I thought a nice little theft of intellectual property by Pete Carmichael to steal that exact play. And it was there. It just the timing got off. But those are the kind of things we haven't seen enough of. I want to see a couple more jet sweeps with Rashid Shaheed, like that worked, and we haven't seen it really at all. It's just some of these things to kind of keep defenses off balance, even if there's a little misdirection. We don't see a ton of misdirection with the Saints. They're pretty much straightforward. We're coming at you, and they're going to see a lot of misdirection this week in Kyle Shanahan.
And speaking of that, I get that, you're trying to distance yourself from Sean Payton to some extent and put your own stamp. But some of the things that worked, hey, let's get him in there. And you talk about Rashid Shaheed. I think that's one of the things. That's like the Devery Henderson play, right? I mean, get him in there and use that Devery Henderson play. Sometimes Sean used it a little bit too much and like forced it into a game at times because it's on the call sheet. But it should be on the call sheet. We need to see it more and see if it can work. Going back to the matchup before we move on and talk about LSU, again, we're going to have our predictions on Saints 49ers at the end of the show. We are going to end by 9:50 no matter where we are. So I'm just letting you know. So we have 11 minutes left in the show. Still have to get to LSU, talk a little Tulane, a little Pels. But real quick, we talked about the offense, Dunk. The Frisco defense against the Saints, the Frisco offense against the Saints defense, pretty similar. Now, this rushing offensive number, ranked 12th, is a little bit skewed because they've had Christian McCaffrey now for 4 weeks. He obviously feels completely comfortable. I did some research. Christian McCaffrey in his last 4 games against the Saints, obviously 3 all with the Panthers, 483 yards and 4 touchdowns. So obviously Christian McCaffrey, like he does to a lot of teams, has done damage against the Saints. Going to have to key on him.
Yeah, and Elijah Mitchell as well. They're a much better running team than those stats reflect. They didn't run the ball that much in Mexico City on Monday night against the Cardinals. I know Troy Aikman on the broadcast kept saying he thought they were going to run the ball more. But if you notice what they do, it kind of reminds me of those old juggernaut Saints teams.
Yeah.
Like 2011 teams. They get the lead with the passing game, and then the second half, they just start wearing people out with the running game. That's kind of what they did to Arizona. They started running in the second half, get that defense worn down, and they're very capable of that. I saw a stat the other day, I think it was yesterday, their offensive line with, I think, 4 of their starting 5 offensive linemen haven't given up a sack all year. Trent Williams, Necker. So this is going to be a tough matchup in a lot of ways.
Trent Williams is the best left tackle in football, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's a monster.
I mean, you can't you're just not going to get past him. Which, before we move on to LSU, real quick, are we going to see Trevor Penning this week?
No, I'll be surprised if he gets back. I don't even know if he's in football shape yet. Might be another week or so. I think
they have to take him off by a certain amount of time, right?
Right. Yeah, I think Cam Jordan's got a chance to play, which will be big. They could use him in the run defense, and he's played against the Niners a lot. He's one of the few guys that was there on that 2011 team. Might be the only one that played. Mark Ingram probably as well in that classic game.
Oh, let's not bring that game up. Jimmy Graham scored a touchdown. Game's over.
Great, by far the best game I've ever covered during my Saints tenure.
There could be a point made that it's certainly the most exciting game in Saints history because it was back and forth, and it kind of reminds you a little bit of the Chiefs and Bills last year, right?
Yep.
I mean, for those, you'd have to be, I guess, over the age of 26, 27 to really remember Saints Niners in 2011 to really remember it. But it was one of those games where the Saints thought they had one. Jimmy Graham goes off on the touchdown, and then Alex Smith drives him right down the field. And I don't know, when I saw Roman Harper where he was standing on that last play, Vernon Davis, you kind of knew it was coming. But
people also forget, Jim, just recently they played an epic game in the Dome that the Niners won 48-46.
Yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo.
The George Kittle play at the end on Marcus Williams where he stiff-armed him.
Yeah, Jimmy G threw 4 touchdown passes in that game.
Yes, that was an epic game between 2 really good teams.
This one won't be like that.
I don't think so either, but it just shows you the great – and look, you're an old-school Saints fan. People don't realize, I mean, this has been an incredible rivalry.
It has been.
Unbelievable games, back and forth. And the Saints have really held their own the last 20 years or so. I mean, they've basically had a winning record in the series. But the old school Saints fans remember when it was much more frustrating.
Yeah, I write a trends column every week, and I mean everything you could possibly imagine in there, right? Who the officials are, what the records are with against those, what the Saints' record is against officials, what the other team's record is against the officials, what uniforms they're wearing, all these things. But mainly, it's focused on the history between the team that they're playing that week. So it's a little bit easier to write when they're playing an AFC team because there's not a whole lot of history. But a lot of young people don't realize that these teams were in the same division for my entire youth, and really until 20 years ago they were in the same division. So I grew up with playing the Niners twice, and trust me, it was no fun playing Joe Montana twice. Even when the Saints were good, the famous woulda, coulda, shoulda speech was against the 49ers, and Jim Mora after this. They came off of strike, and the first game out of strike, Saints were at home against the 49ers, and Saints should have beat them. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. They should have beat them, and the Saints went on a run after that game. Jim Mora went off. Saints won 9 in a row to finish 12-3. But guess what? The Niners didn't lose either. They went 13-2. They went on and won the division, and I think they went on to the Super Bowl that year.
I think the Niners were also the team that handed the Saints their biggest come from behind loss or come from ahead loss.
That's right. The Saints led
35-7.
Saints led 35-7 at halftime. I used that in the Black and Gold show in an extra point once, and the 49ers came all the way back, tied it 35-all. I think that was 1980 because the Saints went to 0-13.
Archie Manning was a quarterback.
That's right. The Saints went to 0. It looked like the Saints were going to break that 0. They were 0-12. They were finally going to get off the schneid. And then the 49ers come roaring back with a young Joe Montana at that time.
Yep.
He had not been to a Super Bowl yet. Throws to Dwight Clark. They tie it up. Ray Wershing kicks a field goal in overtime, 38-35. Nope, 0-13. Now, luckily, they had the Jets on the schedule, so they were able to break the schneid and finish 1-15. But
that game was in the Dome, wasn't it?
No, that game was in San Francisco.
It was? Okay.
Yeah, it was a late afternoon game, just like this is going to be, and it was kind of mushy and nasty. So, yeah.
35-7. I mean, those were back.
Uncle Big Nick says he loved those.
Those were the Aints days, man.
Yeah. You don't remember those days, buddy. You were born in 1980. This game was in 1980, so you were like in a crib somewhere. Don't hand me that crap. All right. We've got to move on, and we've only got about 5 or 6 minutes to talk about. I do want to talk about if I can get my mouse to work correctly here. Talk about the LSU Tigers real quickly. Texas A&M Dunk. We talk about spots where LSU kind of trap spots. This is another one, but LSU keeps winning those trap games.
Credit to Brian Kelly and his staff.
Yes.
They have this team with the right mindset. Like we said the last 2 weeks, tough games, but you could see early on that LSU was dialed in, and they may not cover the spread at Arkansas, but they were going to win the game. And that's really hard to do in college football with young kids, 18, 19-year-olds. They're prone to having their heads in the cloud. And I think this team is really focused right now. I think they've got a lot of momentum in the program. I think they're confident on both sides of the ball with what they're doing, and it shows in how they're playing. I think they win the game, but I'm not sure spread-wise. What's the spread?
9.
I don't know if I would want to lay those, but yeah. I definitely think LSU takes care of business. There's just too much at stake.
I agree wholeheartedly. I'm not going to touch the spread with a stick, but I cannot see LSU blowing a chance to get in, at least in the SEC title game. They're going to get in the SEC title game regardless. They're in. But what I'm saying is I can't imagine that they're going to blow a chance to get into the SEC title chance game with a chance at the college football playoffs, which is something that I don't think anyone could have even dreamed of after the loss to Tennessee. It's amazing that the progression of this team from week 1 and losing to Florida State the way they lost to Florida State to improvement, getting your keisters kicked against Tennessee, and then becoming one of the 5 best teams in the country.
Well, I think if you'd asked before the season if LSU could make the SEC championship game, people would have laughed at you, right?
I think if you would have asked them if they could make a New Year's Day bowl, they would have laughed at you.
Right. So, yeah, this has been probably the best college football season we've had here since I've been in New Orleans. I came here in 2000. But the fact that Tulane is playing for something and LSU, both of them top 20 teams, I mean, it's been a remarkable season, and they both came out of nowhere. Tulane was picked 7th in the American Athletic Conference to start the season, and LSU was picked 5th in the SEC West. So
and you could have got them at 28-1 to win the SEC West.
Wow,
28-1, and they clinched 3 weeks, but 3 weeks left in the season.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's a remarkable year.
Uncle Big Nick, before we move on, Uncle Big Nick's got a question about LSU. He wants to know, do we give them any shot against Georgia? He thinks they will be competitive. I'll get your opinion first.
Yeah, I agree. I think they will be competitive. I think they got a lot more to play for in that game than Georgia does, even though Georgia can't afford to lose. Georgia has shown just last week that they can kind of get in these games like Kentucky and just kind of, I don't want to say sleepwalk, but they get the game at hand and they just kind of cruise. But I can't see them beating Georgia. I just think there's too many factors that favor Georgia in that game. Their quarterback's really good. I think he's very underrated, and their defense will give LSU a lot of problems. I can't see them giving up any running game to LSU in that matchup.
I hope I'm wrong, Dunk, but I think they get destroyed. I think that, and when I say destroyed, I mean by three or more touchdowns. I think it's like
wow,
the spread. Destroyed. The spread is minus 15 or 16 at the moment. I think Georgia covers. I think multiple reasons. As good as Brian Kelly can do, I don't think that this offensive line, which has played much better as the season's going along, can handle Georgia's front. I think that Jaden Daniels is going to have a really tough time trying to find holes against this Georgia defense. And I think Georgia is super motivated because Stetson Bennett and a few other Georgia Bulldogs remember the butt kicking they got by LSU in the 2019 SEC championship game. Trust me, they have not forgotten that, and they're talking about it this week and next week. I don't like LSU's chances. However, that being said, I think that even being in this game is a huge stepping stone, and whatever bowl game they get, I personally think they're going to go to the Sugar Bowl. I think it's going to be LSU Kansas State Sugar Bowl, and I think that and they can beat Kansas State. Tulane beat them. I'm no offense, Tulane fans, but Tulane beat Kansas State. I think LSU can beat Kansas State. So if LSU were to lose in the SEC championship, no matter how much, and then go to the Sugar Bowl and win the Sugar Bowl and finish 11-3, I think that would be an amazing accomplishment and a great stepping stone to the future for the LSU Tigers. Because I think you're going to see almost all these guys coming back next year.
Well, I think we'll know early on in the SEC championship game just by watching Georgia's body language, how they're attacking that game, whether it's good. Because if they do come to make a statement, it could get ugly. I agree with you there.
Agree wholeheartedly. All right, we're not going to have time to talk about the Pelicans because we got to wrap up the show, and we're going to wrap up the show with our Saints 49ers pick. If you got a pick, now's the time to leave it in the comment section. You got about 2-3 minutes to do so. Saints are 9-point underdogs. We don't say that very often. 9-point underdogs against the 49ers. What you got?
I don't think it's going to be a good outcome. I think everything comes down to the 49ers in this game. If they are ready to play, if they're healthy, coming off this short week down in Mexico City, coming back home, but if they come out with good intentions, I think it's a bad matchup. I think they win pretty handily in this game. The Saints will have their A game. Now I don't know if it's good enough, but I would take the 49ers in something like a 27-13 victory or something. I can't see the Saints.
What you do? Copy off my NFL picks column? I think that's the exact score that I had.
Serious?
I think it is.
I don't see the Saints moving the ball consistently against this defense, and things tend to go awry when the Saints play a really good defense. They tend to make mistakes, costly turnovers, and that leads to easy points. This thing could snowball the other way pretty easily.
You know how I know this is probably going to be a bad one for the Saints? Our Saints regulars are nowhere to be found this morning. Jerry and a bunch of other people are all with their hoodats and good morning and Saints are going to win and blah, blah, blah. None of them are here. So
they probably all watched the game Monday night and were like, wow, this is the team we lost to, and the 49ers are annihilating them in front of our eyes. That was probably pretty sobering for Saints fans.
We know you're here, Uncle Big Nick. You're only here because you know that the 49ers have a huge upper hand. Look, I mean, this is not going to be pretty. If I'm wrong, great. I hope I'm wrong. I say it whenever I pick against the Saints, I tell you I hope I'm wrong. But as Dunk said, and basically what we're talking about the entire show, you're putting this game on Andy Dalton's shoulders. There's no other way this is going to happen. If Andy Dalton plays really well, which I seriously doubt, then the Saints have a chance. If the Saints defense comes out and just stomps the run, which I seriously doubt, the Saints are going to have a chance. But both of those things have to happen. And it's nothing that bad against the Saints. I'm just saying that to me, the 49ers are a team that can win the Super Bowl.
I agree. I wrote my column this week saying that. Now's the time to get on the Niners. I
already did that like 6-7 weeks ago.
They got juicy odds right now to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I got them at I forget what it was to
even better when you got them.
Yeah, I got them to win the division. I got them to win more than 10 wins, which is still a little dicey. And I got them to win the Super Bowl, and I got them to win the NFC. So I just think they're the best team in the NFC. I know the Eagles have one loss, but I still think and the 49ers have 4. But I think that they've come together and they've figured it out. Is there a chance? And Uncle Big Nick kind of jokes here. I know he's kidding when he says this. Maybe he's not. Andy Dalton won't make it through this game. If they're down like 17-0 and Andy Dalton's been stinking it up, like I think is going to happen, you think there's any chance they go to Jameis in this game?
No.
I don't either.
I guess if you got,
I don't either.
Yeah, I think they pretty much said, and look, it validated last week the way Dalton played
against a really bad football team. By the way, all the Andy Dalton people came out of the woodwork. They're going to climb right back in those cracks this week. By the way,
that's true. And look, the Rams looked like a team. I remember a great quote from Terrell Owens back in 2002 when the Saints. If you remember that, they lost their last 4 games of the year. They had a chance to get into the playoffs, and they lost to all these bad teams. And I'll never forget it. They played the Niners in the last game of the year at the Superdome. They got beat 38-0. I think they were only 2.5-point underdogs in that game. I remember Brian Alley Walsh coming to me going, "Man, what's wrong with the line on this game? We know the Saints are going to get beat." And Terrell Owens after the game said, "Looked like some of those boys on the other sideline had their bags packed for Mexico or something like that." But that's what I felt like the Rams. They looked checked out. They won the Super Bowl last year. They've had some adversity this year. They're not into it. Their head coach isn't into it.
Nope.
Not to take anything away from the Saints, but I'll be much more impressed this week if they're able to compete with the Niners.
If they even compete, like you said, and I'm not just talking about cover. If they keep this to a 3 or a 5-point game and really play well and play hard, I'll be surprised. I'll give them credit. I'm not going to get on them if they lose in a tight game and they play well. Right. I mean, it is what it is. They're just can't hold up. Barry asks, is Winston still semi-injured? The answer to that, even though they won't tell you, is no. He's not hurt.
He's not.
They just choose not to play him. We all know that. So don't listen to the hype. All right, Doug, I know you got other things going on this morning. Have safe travels to Santa Clara this weekend and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We will talk to you a week from Friday before the Saints travel to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a Monday night.
You got it, brother. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there. We'll talk to y'all next week. Look forward to it.
And like Dunk said, everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much turkey. You'll be sleeping before the Vikings-Patriots game starts. Trust me, it's happened to me, about the last 9 years in a row. We'll talk to you next week. No Dattitude on Friday. We will be back on Monday to review the Saints 49ers game. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday.